right. Hello, everyone. We would like to welcome you all to the Marketing Alliance. For those of you who are not very familiar with us, we are a Colorado-based networking group for professionals in the B2B marketing and communication space. My name is Emily Strober. I am an event programmer with Marketing Alliance. Our name is fairly new. We were formerly known as the BMA Colorado chapter and have been around for over 60 years. Our mission is simply to provide networking and learning opportunities for people just like all of you. And we are also actively seeking volunteers for our 2020-2021 board, specifically in our programming and communications and web. So if any of you would like to learn more about becoming a volunteer, please visit our website and check it out. So switching gears, I'm going to dive into today's webinar, which is a part of our Job Seeker series on Agile social media marketing in 2020. We are very excited to have all of these lovely panelists guiding our discussion today. So I'm just going to give you a quick little intro on each of them, starting with Madison. So Madison Martin has marketing experience for both brand side and agency settings for small and large businesses alike. When she's not hustling during the day, Madison can be seen speaking at marketing events and hosting workshops. She's also the co-founder of Denver Marketing Mavens. Madison, what is a rose and a thorn for you in the current social media landscape?
Yeah, so I would say the rose and thorn of social media is how frequently it is changing and how quickly updates are made. It's an amazing thing because for social media, as a marketer, it keeps it very interesting, keeps us on our toes, and it just keeps all parts of the marketing stack fresh. But it can be a little bit of a thorn because it means you really have to keep up with what's going on in the field. You have to stay on top of the new news, the new updates, and all of that. So that would be my idea of the rose and thorn of social media.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Next up is Amanda. So Amanda Riggio has been with Ogilvy since 2018, working with a diverse portfolio of clients ranging from tech to CPG to healthcare. She's very passionate about innovation with purpose and ensuring all efforts connect back to clients' business challenges and consumer needs. So Amanda, how challenging has this year been for you so far?
What a question. Yeah, it's obviously been an interesting year for everyone. Yes, we've been met with many workplace challenges, as everyone can relate to. But I'm fortunate because my day-to-day was really working with folks across the country before the pandemic, so luckily didn't have a drastic shift there. But in terms of clients, I would say the biggest challenge has been coaching them on how to make fast change, not just evolve with the times of COVID and the frontline presence of racism in the United States, but to do so in a timeline where their actions actually have an impact, right? So a lot of organizations weren't prepared for COVID, really specifically from a digital transformation perspective. And so when I say that, I mean thinking about having their servers on the cloud or being equipped to support e-commerce for their business. But it also applies to the way that companies communicate and make decisions. And what that means, how that translates to is how do they take action efficiently? So I think that's really been the biggest challenge is coaching clients and helping them navigate making those decisions with haste.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, next up is Danielle. So Danielle Bilbrook brings over a decade of holistic marketing strategy to the table, and she has been a speaker and advocate for not only more nimble strategies that pivot year to year, but also increased transparency and responsibility in marketing activity and customer experience. So Danielle, how did you find yourself coming to work in social media?
It was kind of an accident, honestly. About 10 years ago, it was that I happened to be the youngest person that was in a leadership role. And so they decided that social media must be my job. And these days, I don't work in it quite as hands-on anymore. I look at social media more as just one channel that we can use inside of more integrative strategies and focus more on how we can use social media to retain data in a first-party capacity. But yeah, it sort of started out with, well, you're the young person, figure out Facebook, and blossomed from there, I guess, 10 years later now.
Oh my gosh, it's the most relatable story ever. Same.
She must know, right?
The young one. It's like, okay.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Okay, great. And then lastly, but certainly not least, we have Emily. Emily Larson is a social media strategist whose work includes developing and implementing multi-channel strategies, collaborating with creative teams to develop thumb-stopping posts for wide-reaching social accounts, and executing award-winning digital campaigns. So Emily, you have worked both agency and in-house in social media. What are some of the skills that you feel are needed for each?
Sure. So I would say on the agency side, definitely being proactive. As Madison was saying, you really need to keep a close ear to the ground and be able to act quickly on whatever the trending topic is or the latest platform update. Clients will see things like a fancy AR filter and think, I want to be the first to do this. So really keeping a pulse on the social landscape that's changing every day. Also being adaptable. You may not always agree with client feedback, and you need to be able to move on from that and think of new ideas, and just being able to wear many hats. Often in agency settings, there are different components of whatever the role may be. So being willing and able to grow and learn new things. And then on the in-house side, I would definitely say using your budget wisely and investing in tools that are really available for those larger companies, such as Sprinkler for social listening, ForeCard for influencer marketing. And I would also say, especially being on the agency side, being as communicative as possible with your agency partners. A well-developed brief goes a very long way. And involving your agency partners in your marketing plans will definitely allow you to extend your message even further and make an even bigger impact on social.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. Thank all of you. And then also today's webinar is going to be moderated by Taylor Bridges, who is a senior paid media consultant for the Creative Group. Taylor will guide our panelists through a Q&A for about 35 minutes, and then we will open it up for questions for the last 10 to 15 minutes. So feel free to put all your questions in the Q&A section as we go, but just a reminder that we won't take questions until the end of the presentation. So, and I'll also share everyone's contact details at the end. And cool, I think we're ready to get started. So over to you, Taylor.
Awesome. Well, welcome to everyone, and thank you for those intros. I also heard thumb stopping for the first time just now, which I really like. I've never heard that term, so I wrote it down. But we'll kick things off with a pretty open-ended question. What are some of the biggest changes that you've seen in social media marketing in the last 6 months? I know it's been a time of crazy changes, not just in the landscape, but outside. So anyone, feel free to jump in.
Sure, I can kick us off.
Awesome.
I would say the biggest thing, and I'm sure everyone will echo this, is just the demand for immediacy. Time is no longer a luxury that we have because so much is happening in the world. And, exactly as Emily was saying, you really need to keep that ear to the ground, and you really need to be able to respond to timely moments. There's two different opinions here though, right? So I want to acknowledge that. It's get it out there or get it right. I think a lot of brands can probably, feel resonance with that as we think about, the presence of racism in our country. There were a lot of brands that were waiting, a lot of brands that were getting out there right away and then having to correct or course correct based on their brand ethos. So obviously it's ideal to nail both of those, get out there, get it right. But what I have found and learned, it's really important to weigh the benefits and the risks of waiting to respond. So I think the most effective way to do this is to really contextualize the decisions to your brand. Who are you? What do you stand for? Are you a leader in that space? Were you involved in any way? Or probably my favorite question is, could you be effectively involved in any way? Knowing that the role of brands in consumers' lives and different even B2B relationship lives is really evolving. So if you're able to layer in the attributes of your organization, you can make more relevant decisions to you. Not every brand is Nike, we know this, but people like Nike because they've created a brand that's a part of culture, right? So every brand with effective planning can be a part of culture, or at the very least can be a part of a community that matters to them. So I would say, over the last 6 months, I think that has been exacerbated beyond any realm that we probably could have anticipated.
I think too, to jump on what you were saying there, Amanda, in terms of you could get it done immediately or you could get it done right. The patience is wearing thin for lip service. For many years now, social media has been this channel for us to speak directly to consumers. And of course, immediacy is critical. Everybody thinks they are the only consumer that's actually talking to you, and everybody expects an answer and they expect it now, especially in terms of like a customer service or customer question, one-to-one sort of a conversation with a brand. But anymore, people don't want to hear just what you think about a thing. They want to know what you plan on doing about the thing. When we talk about things like this country's long overdue reckoning with systemic racism, there are a lot of good questions that have been asked of brands saying, hey, what do you plan on doing about this? It's not enough to change your profile to a black square for a day and then move on, just to be able to jump into things. And that's something that's long, in my opinion, been true of social media, where brands should avoid jumping in on something that really isn't theirs and co-opting a movement that really isn't theirs. But people want to know now what action is going to be taken. It's not enough to say, we're going to hire more Black people, or even not to, of course, call out the organization at all. I'm glad that we have all women on this panel, but we're all very white. So what are we going to do to actually incorporate more Black, Indigenous, people of color inside of our spaces and make sure that we're hiring people that are bringing in diversity and inclusion? Don't just talk about Black Lives Matter, be about it, do something about it. And don't talk about doing something more, quantify that. Because I mean, we all know, we all work in marketing, saying we're going to get more sales next quarter. Well, one more sale is more sales, right? What are we going to do to quantify this and say more than like, we stand with Black lives? Put your money where your mouth is and show us what you're going to do about it. And so, to the point of kind of getting things right, in my opinion, that's something that's changing, that's fallen on the shoulders of social media managers. Often the people managing social media aren't the ones making these huge at the top decisions, but we're the ones expected to respond in messaging for them. So I think there needs to be, and there has been sort of a change in understanding between the person managing the social media platforms and the leadership who has to make these policies and communicate them effectively in order to avoid that backlash of lip service accusations.
Couldn't agree more. Well said.
Yeah. One thing I'd like to add that's more focused on COVID and small businesses is also the biggest change is using social media for survival. So I do have a client that was all brick and mortar with an e-com site that they didn't really put a lot of focus into. And once everything shut down, we had to pivot, and we had to pivot fast. So talking about using social media immediately and effectively, we had to do both for the survival of her company. And that's something I'm still seeing through the summer is, okay, instead of just being a direct voice of brand to consumer, how can we turn them into loyal customers that will help keep this business afloat? And that's a huge, hurdle I've been working through all summer. And it's been great because, if you have really good social media content and a really good social media manager, you have this strong relationship with your followers. And it's just utilizing that as well. Kind of without scaring them away too. Everyone's a little scared of what's going on right now. So you never want to be too sales heavy, and you also don't want to, if you don't buy this, we're going to go out of sale kind of thing. So there is kind of a little bit of survival for small businesses in particular.
Yeah, I agree with that. And then I think one other thing that a lot of us have already hit on is just constantly evolving, constantly looking at what your marketing plans were, what your plans were for social, and the changing consumer problem. Right. So, for example, we had well thought out, well-researched media strategies in place before COVID hit. And when things really started to take a turn, we had to look at what we were doing, what the consumer mindset is, even what our day-to-day content calendars look like, and constantly change things. And it's been a lot, and it's still changing, and it's probably going to continue to change. So I would definitely say that has been ever growing, because we never want our brands to appear as tone deaf. A post that made sense 6 months ago may very well not make sense to post right now. So really looking at everything and making changes daily.
Yeah.
Definitely. And kind of the follow-up question here, which I think all of you touched on, is what have you learned from these changes? A couple things I wrote down that you all kind of hit on is adaptability, immediacy, authenticity, any kind of other quick takeaways that you're going to be using moving forward that you've kind of taken from this year of changes.
I think Emily hit it on the head is, look at what you maybe poured a lot of time into, but you got to pivot. Like really look at it, and does it apply anymore?
Yeah.
I know that there's a few marketing teams that I worked on as a contractor where, we would have strategy days where we just mapped out 2020 and then we just threw it all out and started fresh. And that's okay. Like, it's okay to do that.
I think too, talking about that adaptability, this really isn't new. We're in digital marketing. Like everything changes every 20 minutes anyway. And so I guess, forgive my candor, but I've long since stopped having sympathy for people who aren't willing to adapt. Because the name of our profession is adapt or die. It just happened in like hyper time this in the last few months, where we've got seven plagues of whatever that have come upon us all at the same time, and we have to pivot really routinely. But these are pretty critical skills that we should be honing anyway as marketers. And so that adapt or die mentality, it has become a very big neon flashing sign, but it's something that I think, while a trend, is also still a fundamental skill that we should always have in our back pockets.
I agree.
Yeah, Danielle, that's a great point. And just to add to that from a very tactical perspective, I feel like a tool that I use to help bring more agile workflow into my day-to-day is just making sure that the clients that I'm working with and the teams have access to a brand ethos. Kind of going back to my answer to Emily's initial question, you have to be able to make decisions fast. You need to know what are the drivers of your decisions. And so if you understand who you are and what you stand for as a brand, then it's easier to make those decisions and adapt faster to what's changing around you. So I would say as a tool, that's a really good thing to integrate into your tool belt, whether you're working with, a Fortune 500 company or a shop on Main Street.
Definitely. So I think those are great, overarching themes. I want to get a little bit more specific. So talking about messaging and how these changes have influenced the actual marketing stack. So I'm going to start with messaging. Has your company specifically put any action plans in place around inclusion that you tend to or have shared on social? Anything kind of specifically with the companies or the agencies or in-house that you work for that you would like to speak to?
So one of my big clients is Microsoft, and they have done a fair amount in the way of diversity and inclusion. Just in general, it's always been, and maybe not always, but especially in the last several years, been a pretty specific cornerstone of who they are as a company. One of the ways that they've always done that is by having essentially employee resource groups. And employee resource groups, even prior to a lot of the protests that went on against the murder of George Floyd, they've existed for a long time, but typically there's been a focus on LGBTQIA employee resource groups. Now there is definitely much more of a focus. I could feel that shift among my teams over there in terms of paying more attention to the employee resource groups that were specific to race. One of the things that they did was they went dark on social I guess it was probably right around the protests, understanding the tone-deaf nature of talking about Microsoft products during this time, with the exception of maybe products that were designed to, or programs that were designed to be inclusive, because there are a fair amount of those programs inside of Microsoft as well. But even doing things like Juneteenth was automatically a holiday especially for Black employees. White employees and employees of other races could take it off, but it was very, very, very encouraged that instead of taking it off, they spent the day educating themselves about Black history, about systemic racism in our country. And they had an internal page that provided a lot of resources that people would be able to go to and educate themselves. Here are a list of movies to watch. Here are a list of books you could start reading. Also, here are some recordings of our employee resource groups talking about the problems at Microsoft and the racism that they have experienced on staff. And we're able to embrace that we don't have to look perfect and we mess things up. And so saying, yeah, I experienced racism the other day when X, Y, and Z happened inside my own team. This is meant not to be something that villainizes the company or the teams, but rather brings people together in an awareness of what not to do in the future and how our actions make people feel and think. So yeah, just I think internally seeing something like that and then communicating those things externally on our social media channels, that these were the steps that we were taking, and this is the way that we're encouraging people to be aware and educated and inclusive.
Yeah, I would say I've seen a lot of internal work being done as well. A client of mine that is, a small local business, they were very clear with their social media following by putting out an email. They had a statement from the founder, what they were doing, where they stand. And then I have another client that's like a bigger company, and they did put something out on social media, but they spent more time internally because they do have a lot of people of color working on their staff. And so they just opened the doors. It's a little similar to Microsoft of just like opening the channels to hear from you, which I'm super proud of them. They had been doing this for quite some time, but with like the rise of the conversation, they just wanted to make sure that everybody was heard. And so I was really happy to see the work done internally there.
Great. Yeah, I can share a story that kind of echoes, the importance of brand ethos, not to hit it over the head, but this just happened to bring that to life. But one of my big clients is Walgreens, and they are a company that was born on the south side of Chicago. That is where their first location was. And it was obviously an area that was really heavily impacted by the protests and also from the looting. So what they did was take a look at what was important to them. What was important to them is staying true and supporting the community that they came from. And so they looked at their stores, and it wasn't about losing the value of what was looted inside of their stores. It was about making sure that the way that they supported the customers that went to those stores was still staying true. They called every single person that had a prescription with that pharmacy that was closed because of damage to make sure that they had a way to get their prescriptions. They opened up micro pharmacies so that they could show up in the neighborhood in that time. They partnered with the mayor of Chicago to make sure that they were doing what they could to support their home. And so a lot of those efforts have been made or continuing to be made in terms of talking about it on social media. It's a fine balance because you want to make sure that you're doing things for the right reason too. So some things have been shared on social, some things have been shared in terms of more PR channels. So I would say there's definitely a balance of how you're sharing those things out and questioning, the purpose behind those. But the authenticity and using that brand ethos to define how you respond can be really effective.
Definitely. I want to pivot a little bit here to talking about actual tactical and some strategic points for your clients. So how have changes over the last 6 months influenced the marketing stack for the clients that you guys work with? Any new applications, channels, tools? I think Emily mentioned Sprinkler. Have you started to implement or maybe ramped up since COVID and the pandemic? And then have any of these apps and platforms that you guys use on a daily basis, so obviously Facebook, LinkedIn, any others, rolled out any new features that you guys have been implementing?
Definitely.
Feel free to let me know if I need to repeat. That was a lot.
So part one, my answer to part one, one of my clients has recently ramped up their podcast marketing strategy, exploring a totally different avenue outside of social. So really expanding our awareness on platforms such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, And it's really helped, allowed us to stay relevant by having different guests on the show speak to topics that are on everyone's mind, such as diversity and inclusion, how COVID is influencing consumer behavior, and what you can do to adapt to that. The podcast has really allowed us to, like I said, tap into new markets and communicate to a captive audience. So really providing that value. It's helped improve our clients' SEO as well, linking back to the website, including transcripts, and just a totally different approach that we've never taken. And it's proven to be really successful so far.
I think it's really interesting that you say that too, Emily, because I apologize if you can get ambulances in the background. I live across the street from a hospital, so everything's okay. But it's interesting that you say that, because I mean, I know that this isn't necessarily like social media channel specific, but to kind of piggyback on what you're saying, I just had a kickoff call with a client this morning where I said, you have to be prepared for social media reach, followers, engagement, conversion to drop off in the next few months. We have an election coming up. We are in a very volatile election year with a lot of tension. And I prepared my clients for the same thing back in 2016, and we saw it. We saw drops in numbers across the board. And that was, brand agnostic, industry agnostic. So right now, what I've been preparing clients to do, and it's like I said, it's not necessarily a social marketing stack, but to figure out how to use your social media to get people off of social media and start to get their information for other channels like email marketing, like doing a newsletter, like a podcast, something like that, where you can start to reach them on these other channels as they start to drop off, and get them right now while you can, before things get really chaotic and really tense, which is coming soon. And to be able to retain that first party data too. So that way you're not platform dependent and you're not social dependent. You are using this in an integrative capacity and in a holistic way to be able to still communicate with people regardless of whether or not they're on Facebook.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say in terms of, what's new and what's coming out, I personally love jumping in what's new. So like I'm obsessed with TikTok. I've been exploring Instagram Reels, all that fun stuff. But again, coming from like the small business side, where, I have a lot of small business clients, it's really easy to get like, shiny object syndrome and want to move to a new platform. But what I really try and stress is, you have the following on Facebook, Instagram. Have we used all the features that they have before you explore a new application or a new something else as well? Especially like you said, Danielle, we have an election season coming up. Stuff is insane online right now. And, my clients are asking about holiday. What are they going to do about holiday? The ones that do have brick and mortar, do they have to get ready to be online again? Because stuff could close down. So what we're doing is exploring different features, all the features on the platforms they're already using. And then once we've exhausted those, if their audience is growing a little bit more, I would recommend expanding out. But again, going with small businesses, usually it's a contractor and then one person on their internal team. So it's also a bandwidth issue as well. And just kind of ringing them back in of, yes, that does look very, very fun, but maybe it's not the right time to introduce this new platform.
Awesome. I loved all those answers. And Danielle, you have an uncanny ability to predict our next questions. So I'm going to pivot to everyone's favorite topic right now, which is top of mind for everyone, which is the election. However, specifically, any related to these platform and feature changes, obviously Facebook ad transparency is a huge topic that is never ending. Do any of you guys have experience with advertisers that Facebook is specifically looking to increase transparency in? Not limited to political ads, but mortgage, credit lines, any of those advertisers that can be a little bit tricky to get things approved in, and that Facebook seems to constantly be updating and changing.
Yeah. I don't have any
with those. Go for it.
I don't have any political ads this year. Kind of, thank goodness. I already got enough gray hairs in 2016, but I did have a few. And it's just making sure you as the social media marketer understand every single thing that they're asking for when it comes to transparency. Especially talking about Facebook, if anybody does paid ads on Instagram and Facebook, they'll also find that ads manager can be kind of glitchy. And so we would run into our political ads would be disapproved. They don't really give like, this is exactly why, and you have to do some digging. So you have to be really savvy of like, okay, is this really disapproved? Or maybe we just need to switch 2 words around and get it in. And you know, the clients are really looking toward you as the expert. So just do your research there. Outside of political, I did have healthcare as well. I had a plastic surgery client that did not understand that you could not have images of like the outlines of the surgery they were going to do and stuff. And so just really, you know, don't be afraid to take it on yourself. You know, I was very blunt with them of like, this is what I need for creative and this is how we're going to write the copy, because it is very specific. You can't tell somebody they need to change. You can't tell somebody they need something to make themselves better. And so it does get really tricky with copy. I think that's the hardest part versus the imagery that people can get caught up on, that if they haven't done these before, they're not ready. They're not ready to see. Sorry, not that you can't do it.
In my experience, I had started doing some consulting for a political candidate back in 2018, and that's when I got certified by Facebook, where you have to submit your driver's license and
your social security card,
all of this. And so if you're going to be in a sensitive area, you will need to do that thing. I mean, I worked with a small business that was a clothing brand, but because they had a semi sort of political message on one of their t-shirts, all of our ads would get disapproved because of that political message. So you do have to be a little savvy about it. But so one of the reasons that I was asked to be on this panel was because I had participated in the Gold Key, not Gold Key, 14ers, the 14ers this last year for my nonprofit client that caters to LGBTQ men. And we do a campaign every year around Pride that is essentially like, look, we know you guys are having sex. We want you to be safe about it. And so having to do paid ad campaigns to get the word out about PrEP and where to get PrEP and how to get PrEP same day, which is there in order to protect them and enable safe sex, gets tricky. So in my experience, and I don't know how many of you have seen sort of the trend around ads right now for underwear or like genital spray that makes them smell better and things like this. God, I'm doing the
specific feed right now.
Like I'm doing the most right now, and I'm sorry about that. But like all of the creative is very euphemistic. All of the copy is very euphemistic. We're not calling parts what they are, and we're not saying exactly what we mean to say. And that's one of the ways that I've found that you are able to get around some of the more explicit things that Facebook has guidelines against, but you have to know those guidelines inside and out. Like I literally have them bookmarked in the categories that I run ads in so that I can constantly go back to them and make sure that I'm staying inside the parameters and coloring only a little outside the lines.
Yeah, and one thing I would say to kind of piggyback off that is keep trying. Like you could have an ad that gets disapproved like 5 or 6 times, which is very frustrating, but sometimes you're not doing anything wrong. It's literally just you have to switch some words around or anything. So don't get discouraged, I would say, because especially running political ads, it's a little intimidating, all the information you have to give to Facebook. It's like, you guys follow me on my phone, you already know. But you do have to go through like a lot of hurdles to get approved. And you have to make sure your client is approved as well, their page. But after that, it kind of makes you a little bit more of a valuable employee as well, because it's a lot to get approved and it can take some time. But yeah, bookmark what you need to know and just keep going back to it and being like, okay, instead of saying you, I have to switch it to us or something, so just don't get discouraged.
This is not on the question list, but raise your hand if you've been personally victimized by a Facebook support rep.
Oh my gosh.
This is a safe space.
I like the Mean Girls reference. It was fantastic.
Thank you. It can be tough, but I think
I have to do some breathing exercises every time I talk to them.
Do a lap, like drink a water.
Exactly.
Yeah. Amanda or Emily, did you have anything to add to that question, or do you want to move on?
I
Good to
think,
move on.
yeah, I think they
Okay.
covered it.
Cool. Let's talk about testing. Again, adaptability, immediacy, I think is kind of the theme of this webinar, but are you guys testing more, testing less, anything that's kind of come up in the last 6 months that you started testing?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think I can answer it more broadly than social, because I think a lot of the testing is, the need for testing is coming from a realization that a lot of foundational audience research hasn't been done. So there's been a call for a lot of that to identify, okay, who are we really talking to? Let's reevaluate that, and a hyper focus on identifying how those people are changing. I think we all know at this point, COVID is not a short period thing in our lives. It is something that is transforming us forever. I just have spent a lot of time in the last 6 months digging deeply into that research. The kids that are being born during COVID are actually already deemed Gen C. There's so much that we have to learn about groups and how it's changed every single behavior at different points. So I would encourage everyone, a great tool to kind of stay on top of those things is McKinsey does a biweekly survey, on consumer behavior. And it is wonderful. They're still doing it. It is free. Take a look at it. You can just Google that and it will come up. They have a specific question that actually segments how people are reacting based on the generation that you belong to. So while it doesn't specifically deliver on your question, Taylor, apologies in terms of testing, it is kind of that precursor to testing that I've seen a really significant impact in my day-to-day. Because at the same time—
And can you, oh,
yeah.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that really quick again? I think you cut off a little bit, that on consumer behavior.
Oh, sorry. Where did I cut out? Did you guys want to talk about McKinsey?
Oh, no. I was just talking about the free tool on consumer behavior. What was that called?
Yeah, so McKinsey does a biweekly survey on consumer behavior as it relates
Gotcha.
to COVID. Mm-hmm.
Gotcha.
And it's a great tool. And so I think in a space where a lot of clients are cutting budget, so they might not be able to test, that is a great way to kind of supplement testing in the upfront, in that more of discovery phase, so that you can be more sure if you don't have the dollars to test.
Awesome.
Yeah, I would say I do a lot of paid advertising on Facebook and Instagram, and usually we have fresh creative queued up just to keep it, fresh and avoid any sort of ad fatigue. But now it's become have more queued up in case we do need to pivot our messaging, in case something does come up a little tone deaf, just having a little bit more, so we're more sensitive to the times and what's actually going on right now.
Awesome.
Yeah, we've been looking just with recent news with the Facebook boycott and looking at our brands moving away from that platform. We've recently started to explore completely different platforms for advertising, such as Google's new discovery ads, and the way that those placements are launched could be a great way to expand beyond social. I feel like I keep bringing up things outside of social, but really is the time to think about different ways to explore reaching your audience. And additionally, going back to that consumer mindset and looking at platforms that consumers are already on, such as Pinterest. I work with a lot of CPG clients, and it's a perfect fit, that platform. People are searching recipes and looking for information and products to discover from new brands. So looking at shoppable grocery pins, that's a new ad feature that they've recently launched. And just thinking about, what do consumers want? What do consumers need? And where are they right now in their life? So trying to facilitate those conversions in a way that's as seamless as possible is definitely something that we're looking to expand on.
I
Definitely.
think maybe it's not testing more or less, but I feel like and maybe it's back to the concept of immediacy and how things are moving so fast. And this client kickoff I had this morning, we only talked 6 weeks ago, and it feels like 2 lifetimes ago. And so because the timeline is dumb and it's just super smashed together, I think other other stakeholders, I'm having a lot of conversations around, no, you need to test for longer than this. Testing different community engagement programs, Twitter Q&As, AMAs, et cetera, or testing different ads. I feel like the inclination that I'm seeing from clients and stakeholders right now is that, well, it's not working, so we need to move on right now, because like everything is right now, especially with all of the changes that are constantly going on around us. With Microsoft, they were one of the brands that came off of Facebook for a few months that did the boycott piece. We still don't know if we're going back or not. But first it was we removed the ads because of the civil unrest, and then it was we removed the ads because there was a natural disaster in one of our locations, and then we removed the ads because of the boycott. And so because all of these things are happening, I think I'm feeling an immediacy from clients to say, like, if it's not working, scrap it and move on. Like, and I work with a lot of engineers, so fail fast is a pretty big motto that they stick to anyway. But I'm having to remind people that marketing doesn't work that way, and social media doesn't work that way. And if you're going to test, you need to give your test some time to bake. So I'm not sure that we're testing necessarily more often, but I am having to calm people down about testing more.
That's a job in itself.
Just a quick reminder.
Definitely.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah.
We have just one question so far. So just a reminder to get your questions in. We'll get to them in probably about 10 minutes or so.
Awesome. And I think kind of that last point, everyone wants what they want now, and cheap and good. So sometimes it's hard to wait on those test results and actually show value that way, when the test may seem really good at the outset and everyone's on board, but 2 weeks down the line when it's taking too long and you don't have that significant data, but we want to see results, you can kind of have the pressure put on you by clients. However, I know we've been talking a lot about the last 6 months, kind of the current trends, but I do want to take a look forward because, as everyone knows, 2020 is a hellscape. So let's look at some positives and talk predictions for the next 6 months and beyond. It doesn't have to be about the election. It doesn't have to be about current events. It could be, channel focused, messaging focused, testing focused, really anything that you guys are seeing in our near future for social.
Sure, I can start. Another tool that I love is Edelman does a trust barometer every year. That is a great place to look for predictions as well. They did a COVID specific one. They did a racial injustice one as well. So definitely take a look at that. Something that I think was probably most compelling for me this year in the trust barometer is twofold. One is consumers are now more likely to be open to brands playing a bigger role in their lives than they ever have before. As you think about brands like Louis Vuitton changing their factories in France to produce hand sanitizer instead of handbags, that's the kind of stuff that they're looking for. We welcomed them into our lives, and we now expect them to continue to play a positive role in our lives. So as you think about how that applies to brands across a number of industries, that requires a lot of thought. How are you not only going to provide products to your clients or services to your clients, but how are you going to make their lives easier? That can be transcended to the way that you have customer experience, sure, but also what is your website like? Is it easy? Are you removing barriers? Is someone having a hard time finding any sort of links or services on your site? That has to be easy. If it's not, you will lose a customer. So I think that is so crucial right now. The other side of the equation is that trust has become on par with quality, price, other major things in terms of decision making for consumers. So especially as you think about social and building those relationships, it has never been more important. Building trust, building one-to-one relationships is the currency moving forward. So I would say those are really the two big things that I think are paramount as we think about 2021 planning.
That's great.
Yeah, that nails it.
Are you guys gonna let Amanda mic backdrop, or anyone else have a prediction?
I think that there are probably a few, and I'm seeing this sort of across the board in marketing, but personalization, you know, to Amanda's point about us letting brands into our lives in a way that we, you know, never have before, and in an unprecedented way, one might say, if we're not tired of that word yet. Yeah, personalization that we're seeing kind of across the board, and more tools that are allowing personalization in terms of, you know, tracking website activity and being able to deliver really tailored, unique experiences via your website. I think we're going to start seeing that inside of social media as well. I think we're going to see, you know, some more hyper segmentation in those ways. And that kind of leads also directly into privacy. Privacy is a drum that I mean, I feel like I've been beating it forever. And even when GDPR was going on, and I mean, I've spoken on panels about GDPR and just said, like, stop acting like this is happening everywhere else but here. You have to start treating everywhere your entire marketing ecosystem as if it's the UK and you are under these rules. And so it's really important, I think, that people start to think about their shitty approach to opt-ins, you know, that, I mean, we are taking data from people and we're being shady about it, and we're not asking enough questions, and we're not allowing them to make choices, and people are tired, they've had enough. I think there will be regulation about privacy that is coming around the bend. You know, how many congressional hearings can we have all of the major social media and marketing and commerce heads sit in before we start to say, like, something is going to change soon? So I think getting ready for that and cleaning up our act now and how we approach things. We already saw after 2016 that we lost all the third-party targeting in social media advertising, or at least in Facebook advertising, that we had previously had before. That is not a trend that's going away. So as people do want more personalization in terms of creating a better user experience, they also want to feel like they have more privacy. I had a client ask me, you know, how much personalization is too much? And I'm like, people like it. People only notice advertising when it's bad. They don't notice when an ad has been delivered to them completely tailored for them because they were looking for something like that and they're very interested in it. People get angry when it's bad, when it seems like it's supposed to be tailored, and they're like, what is this? I don't like that this thing came into my life in this way. It's like autocorrect that way. We never really like pay attention to it until it says duck, and like we definitely didn't mean duck, you know? So I think being aware of the privacy concerns, the regulatory changes that I think are very likely to happen if we especially are talking about, there's a lot of talk about censorship on social media platforms right now. I won't get into personal feelings on that, but because of that, I think as brands, we have to start preparing for other targeting pieces to be taken away from us. And that's why, like, I hate encouraging people to get off of social media in their organizations. It's not really the message I'm trying to send. It's just, don't live and die on a platform.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and keep your eye on what's popped up right now. Like, QR codes are back. Okay.
Right?
Right.
Oh my God.
Every marketer is like, no.
Like, I have people that are sending me these, and I'm like, wait a minute. Did I go back in time? Are these cool again?
Like 2010 again? I don't know. Yeah, but I mean,
conversation with a client yesterday. Yeah, I mean, it is like the perfect boomerang case, right? But as we also start to think about how things that are existed in like kind of our toolkit for making decisions, QR codes make things safer. So now we want to use that. So
exactly. And like,
how does that apply to other things?
Even when, you know, a vaccine does roll out, it's going to be a long time if we ever get back to normal, and this might be the new normal. So keep an eye out on what is popping up. QR codes, what other applications or tools. And I know we've always hit home with mobile, like always focus on mobile, and I think that's 100% more now than ever. Like 2021 will be on mobile. People are ordering food mobile, they're using their QR codes. Like everything new is on
direct to consumer for just about everything.
Yeah.
Emily,
Yeah,
I have to cut you off.
Oh,
No,
sorry.
you're fine. I was just going to say, to add to Danielle's point earlier, Facebook actually removed 1,000 more targeting options
Yeah.
today. So we're continuing to see that with the greater push for privacy and
Great.
transparency. These platforms are just going to continue to change. It's a prediction that I think we all know, and it's kind of all ingrained in us at this point. Is TikTok even going to be around come October? What's next for Reels or even Byte, the second coming of Vine? So we'll just have to see all these new platforms either pop up, go away, change targeting options, and so forth. So I think that a lot more changes are coming, and I've seen a lot of changes this year alone. And I'm interested if you agree, if it seems to just be so condensed in terms of the changes that these major social networks are making.
I can't see, honestly, in terms of like Facebook advertising, I used to be able to make a really, really good case for my B2B clients to be using Facebook advertising, because your business is still a consumer, like it's made up of consumers, and we had good targeting options. Now they've eliminated all of the things that were effective. So I can't really make a great case for it in a lot of ways.
I struggle as well. It's really, really hard to get a good return.
I do want to say one more thing. There is literally no excuse for any of us that are sitting here talking or listening or watching at all to not be seeking out diversity in our stock photos, period. Like, and this isn't just racial diversity. This is also orientation diversity. It is so hard to find a picture of a person in a wheelchair who is not either cheering over something they accomplished or very sad about being in a wheelchair. Like, it is really difficult. So I think that we should be pushing for a lot more of this creative to be available to us. Right now, we're not using it, so nobody's providing it, but we need to set the tone for that in all of our creative.
To keep the social vein, there are a ton of amazing influencers who are, especially women of color, who are more than willing to sell some of their imagery to help get their name out too. That's what we found. It's just like, let's reach out to the real people who have this beautiful content that we want to showcase. That's one outlet. Because right now with this pandemic, photo shoots aren't happening. Stock photos slow down a little bit, but we need to see these people.
Definitely. Emily, do we have time for one more question, or do we want to move on to listener questions?
Yeah, we can do one more quick one, and then we have 2 questions to answer.
Cool. All right, so we'll keep this one short and sweet, kind of rapid fire. Each one of you, it would be great to give a tip or best practice that you guys want to share for the rest of the group here.
Sure, I can kick it off. So I would definitely make sure that you're choosing your platforms wisely. And I think that really starts with understanding the core demographic on each platform. So we know that users 25 to 34 are the most popular demographic on Facebook. 71% of Americans between 18 and 24 are on Instagram. So really making sure that your target audience is the majority of the population on that social network, so that you're not just talking to yourself.
Yep, I would agree with that 100%. Like, focus. So focus on your platforms and focus on your audience. I have a lot of clients that say, oh, my target audience is everyone. That's not true. Like, yeah, you may have sold products to everyone, but let's look at the scale here and find like which audience is, buying the most, and then nail it down from there. It's just all about focus, because there is a lot of clutter on social.
Didn't you know, Emily, that actually my audience only lives on the platforms that I live on? So that's how it works. It's the only place that they live are the ones that I'm comfortable with. I think that is that's a big one, is getting clients to be able to step out of the box, getting organizations to be able to step out of the box and try new things, but also to, like, if you have limited time, dedicate yourself to not just the place where your audience is, but also the place that you know the best. It's the quickest ramp up. That's a pretty good middle ground to start if you're really not sure of where. And to build community, that's not going anywhere. People want to feel like they're attached to something larger. So how can you work on really building community on your social media pages wherever people live?
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that is just finding every single way that you can make things easier for your clients, easier for your customers. People are busy, people are being inundated because they're spending so much time on digital. So many ad dollars are going into digital marketing, right? So how can you stand out by making something easier for someone? I'll kind of get ahead. I know one of the questions is about, how are you going to be, helping people make, donations if their budgets are being cut? Okay, well, how can we make that easier? So we can talk about that a little bit more in a moment, but that just feels very resonant right now where people have a lot going on. How do you remove friction?
I'm going to cheat and add one more. I'm so sorry. But also take care of yourself, because as hard as this is for clients and brands, it's really hard on digital marketers trying to stay on top of everything and to be an expert, and give yourself a break if you don't get it right the first time. That's my soapbox.
Awesome. Well, I'm a big proponent of taking the easy way and making things easier and taking breaks. So let's move on to questions. Emily, did you kind of want to kick those off, or do you want to have me read them out?
Sure. So the first question is, a few of our clients are social change nonprofits, and their donation and supporter base are all getting budget cuts. Any ideas to help social engagement to help turn the corner?
I work with a nonprofit that right now we figured out that the big website redesign that we had the whole scope and everything set up, and big dollar project, because their websites are terrible and are not getting them the donations or the volunteers that they need. All their budgets got cut, so the new website project got indefinitely postponed. The way we got around it is we built a really quick and easy chatbot, and we did it using the tool is ChatFuel. It's super simple. Even a non-coder like this person can build something pretty quickly and integrate it. And then we took that chatbot that we built specifically for Facebook Messenger, and we integrated it into their website. It was literally a piece of code they dropped in the header to their website, and now they have people who are able to work with them in real time on donations, questions, volunteers, etc. It was a huge success, and we actually pivoted most of our ads that direction as well, to start those messenger conversations, because we were finding that we were able to get people to where they needed to go and where we needed them to go much faster than trying to navigate the website that wasn't very good.
Oh, congrats, Danielle. That's awesome. That's a great story. I would just add to that from the messaging perspective, is just trying to figure out how you can talk to those donors and those supporters in a different way. Priorities are shifting. So is there something that you know about that donator or that supporter that can make your message a bit more appetizing? So how can you build a relationship with them so that the conversation that you're having is a little bit more resonant and maybe a bit more in tune with the time? So just taking into consideration maybe what you were saying before, and as all of the ladies have been saying here today, maybe some of those are on pause for now, and how does that message need to shift to be a bit more relevant with what's important right now? Because whether you're working with a business or you're working with a consumer, everyone is a person. So a lot of those consumer trends apply to people and how we make decisions in a business, even if we're not buying something from a brand.
Definitely. We got one more here. All right. So what are your thoughts on resharing content related to social justice? Would you consider this to be lip service, or do you think that this is an appropriate way to elevate voices? And then in parentheses, my context is within an arts nonprofit organization.
I would say it's lip service if it's not really related to your brand or your audience. As an arts nonprofit organization, I would say find your supporters, your followers who are sharing content on social justice, and reshare them and give them the support, because they know you know them, and it seems a little bit more authentic. Or a prominent person or influencer in that space that you want to show support as well. I don't know if you ladies agree with that. But
I think that, I mean, I don't know that it necessarily has to relate to your brand, if only because, like, if we're talking about racial justice, like, Black people work everywhere. And so I think it's important to, if you're going to share the content, that you relate it to a particular mission that your brand has, even if it's not related to what your brand does, a mission that you have that you're being really cognizant of, and make it actionable, make it something, because this should be talked about in all spaces. But if you're just sharing it to share it, to be a part of a conversation without moving it forward, then no. You know, intention is not everything. What comes after intention?
perfect. That's what I meant. You said that perfectly.
Awesome. Any last comments to add? It looks like we are just we just hit 6 o'clock, so there we go. Well, thank you guys so much. Big thank you to Taylor and all of the panelists. This was amazing. Thank you for your participation and all of your insight on the topic. I know everybody appreciated it. I went ahead and shared all their LinkedIn profiles in the chat so you guys know exactly where to find them. And if you want to attend any of our upcoming webinars, visit our website. We have a couple free webinars coming up on how to motivate yourself to navigate today's job market, as well as tips and tricks for email marketing success. So be sure to check those out. And I hope everyone has a great day, and thank you for attending.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.